Hey there, fourth grade. It's Mr. Remedies back with another lesson in our unit on nonfiction and how those texts are organized. As you can see, oops, as you can see on your screen, today we're talking about how nonfiction authors organize information by using something we call cause and effect. Okay, and I'm willing to bet that you guys are going to be all stars at this. All right, as always, we have some learning goals and success criteria. So let's head on over and see what we got going on today. Our learning goal is pretty simple today. Today we're learning how to notice when an author uses or organizes information using cause and effect. Okay, some success criteria to help you know that you're really getting this idea are three I can statements. The first one being I can define cause, I can define effect, and nope. So our learning goal today, boys and girls, is that we are learning to notice when an author organizes information using cause and effect. Along the way, we have some success criteria that'll help you know that you really are getting this idea. And they can be wrapped up in three I can statements, like I can define cause, pretty important. I can define effect, also really important. And I can identify causes and effects within a given text. If you can hit those along the way, then you have really nailed down this idea and you've achieved your learning goal for today. Now, let's move on to those all important vocabulary words. First vocabulary word is really important for today's lesson, and that's the word cause. A cause is why something happened, it is the reason an event happened. Okay? The best friend of the word cause is effect. Effect is the event that happened. Right? So we want to make sure we have a really good grasp on these two vocabulary words before we move forward. Okay? Let's look at cause and effect within a text. Let's do that now. All right, guys, to illustrate cause and effect, what we like to do is return to Parrots over Puerto Rico. Okay? So I want to draw your attention to a specific passage or a specific selection in the text. Starting on page, not starting on page. All right, so we'll go ahead and read what's on the screen, and then we can practice identifying cause and effect to really see how the author has organized this nonfiction text. Iguaca, iguaca, the parrots called as the forests where they made their nests were cut down. The parrots began to disappear from places where they had flown for millions of years. By 1937, there were only about 2,000 Puerto Rican parrots in the Luqueño Mountains to the east. A few years later, the parrots were living in just one place, El Yunque, a tropical rainforest in those mountains. After Puerto Ricans gained American citizenship, many of them moved to the United States. Those who stayed in rural parts of the island built houses and farms in the areas where parrots once lived. Many of the parrots, tall old trees were made into charcoal to use for cooking fires. And people still hunted and trapped the parrots. Moving on. In the 1950s, birds called pearly-eyed thrashers moved into the rainforest and tried to steal the parrots' nesting holes. Like clever thieves, these birds entered places where other birds are struggling to live and compete with them for nest sites. The parrots fought the thrashers, jabbing at them with their sharp beaks and defending their nests with harsh cries. But the parrots now had too many enemies and too few trees. The flock became smaller and smaller. By 1954, there were only 200 parrots left. Puerto Ricans elected their first governor, and the island became a U.S. Commonwealth. Not a state, not an independent nation, but something in between. The people argued, should their island remain a Commonwealth? Should it be a state? Should it be independent of the United States? Everyone had a different idea, but all were proud to say, Yo soy Boricua, I am Puerto Rican. The flock of Puerto Rican parrots became even smaller. By 1967, only 24 parrots lived in El Yunque. Iguaca, iguaca, the parrots called as they looked for some place, any place, to find food and nesting holes for their chicks. Puerto Ricans looked up and saw that their Iquacas were almost gone. People had nearly caused the parrots to become extinct. Now people started to help the parrots stay alive. In 1968, the governments of the United States and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico worked together to create the Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program. Its goal was to save and protect the parrots. The first part of the plan was to create an aviary, a safe place for parrots to live and raise chicks. Okay, so let's continue on. Parrots squawked at scientists with their long-handled nets, gently lifted eggs and chicks from their nesting holes. The scientists always left at least one egg or chick in each nest so some birds could continue living in the wild. Pretty smart. In 1973, Le Cuyo Aviary opened in El Unique. Incubators in the aviary kept the eggs warm. The Puerto Rican parrots raised in captivity had no experience as parents, so Hispaniolan parrots helped raise the chicks. These parrots come from the nearby island of Hispaniola. They are like cousins of Puerto Rican parrots, but are not as rare. Parrots over Puerto Rico. So let's take a little bit closer look and really break this apart and look and see how cause and effect was presented in this text. All right. So there was cause and effect everywhere, guys. Oh my God. I hope you guys were able to pick up on it. But the first example of cause and effect in the selection was that the forests were cut down. Right? It doesn't say who cut them down at the beginning, but the forests were cut down. And if you can think back, this is a story very similar to our unit in science about natural resources and about food webs and whatnot. So, and habitats. So, if the forests were cut down, what did the text say that caused? It says the parrots began to disappear. If you cut down someone's home, that person has to move. That animal, that organism has to move, right? And they begin to disappear. Right? Because they began to disappear and the Puerto Rican parrots moved to a different area, they encountered some enemies, namely the pearly-eyed thrashers, who started stealing the parrots' nesting holes. So now the parrots have less possible habitats, less possible trees for nests, and then they are competing with other animals, with other birds for nesting in their new home. So that's going to be the cause of something else. Because the parrots had more enemies to fight. What's going on there? Right? When an organism has many predators and many enemies, it begins to struggle for survival. And finally, the flock of parrots became even smaller. If you have more enemies, like I said, animals struggle to survive. Right? So here on our slide, we can really see that starting with the initial event of the forest being cut down, that is a cause. And that causes the parrots to begin to disappear. But because they disappeared, that's an effect, but that is also the cause of the next event. Because they disappear, then they have to move into certain areas where these other birds, these pearly-eyed thrashers, lived. And then that's an effect, but then that causes another event. So hopefully you are seeing that cause and effect is everywhere because usually one event causes what we say a chain reaction or a domino effect. Maybe you've heard that expression sometimes. So usually nonfiction authors will organize their information in cause and effect, and knowing that an effect of one cause will become the cause of the next event, and so on and so forth down the line. If you noticed, there was only one time that the author used the actual word cause. So it's our job as readers to really understand and connect the dots between one event and what that event, what effect those events would have, and what the results of those events would have. The authors, they know that their readers are smart. They know that the fourth graders in Copper's Cove, they're on it, and so they're not going to be very clear or blatant. They're not going to spoon feed you with words like cause and effect. All right, let's move on. Boom, shall we? Yes, we shall. To a review. Boom, there you go on your screen. Very quick lesson for you today. As a review, nonfiction is is often organized in a cause and effect structure. A cause is the reason something else happened. An effect is that event that happened. But as we saw in our Parrots Over Puerto Rico example, one effect becomes the cause of another event, and then that event becomes the cause of another one, and so on and so forth. Okay? And we talked about how authors, they don't always use the words cause and effect. They're skilled writers. Right? They want you guys to discover that and make that connection ourselves. And so you guys are doing a bang-up job. All right, guys, that's been a lesson on one of my favorite nonfiction organizations is Cause and Effect. I really like seeing that. We see it a lot in science. We see it a great deal in social studies. And I think it's a very useful way to organize information. So today, during your independent reading, I really want you to encourage you to notice any cause and effect structures or organization in your nonfiction text. So go over to Epic, check out maybe a science-related book or social studies, maybe a little history book, and see if you can recognize those structures. All right, as always, you know me from my secret hideout somewhere in Copperas Cove, Texas. I've been Mr. Remedies. You are my fantastic fourth graders, and we will see you next time.